were all chips of glacier ice, and they were like 200 feet thick when they calved. The Arliss one at the time was 346 nautical miles northwest of Barrow. So I was going almost halfway out to the North Pole. A good third, more than a third anyway. So I came back and I called Dick King, because I knew our contract said that you couldn't fly anybody commercially unless the company gave you permission. And I didn't know that the company was negotiating, they were leasing a DC-4, and they were going to fly a contract for a couple of years for ARL to support Arliss 1, and then later Arliss 2. So I called Dick King and he said, yeah, I think you could do it, but you got to talk to Sigurd. So I waited on the phone and Sigurd came on in a few minutes and he said, yeah, he always called me Mary. He says, you can do it, Mary, but you've got to be completely caught up on your mail runs. So I flew on Saturday and an extra section or two to Wainwright, and then I made my schedule on Monday, and at noon I got back and I called Bobby and I said, I've got one more trip to make to Wainwright this afternoon, the weather's pretty good, could we go tomorrow? And then tomorrow was the 15th of February, and he said, yeah, it looks like that'll be okay. So Bobby showed up at about 7 o'clock in the morning, and we went out to the airport, and we were flying, and I was flying November 6004 Echo, and Bobby was in 6006 Echo. And we talked for a little bit, and I noticed right off the bat that my HF radio wasn't working. So Bobby had contact with Barrow at Arliss 1, and that was okay. But 2/3 of the way to Arliss 1, my ADF quit. They were tube radios. They were Lear ADFs, and they had tubes in them. And the tubes, in extreme cold, they were subject to vibration, and they would quit. So I didn't have an ADF, so I really had to stay with Bobby. And we got to Arliss 1 okay, at about 1,000 feet. We went out all the way into a little headwind, and I had 45 gallons of gas. I had 9 cans of gas, of 8087 in the airplane. I put 5 in the left tank and 4 in the right tank, and all the 180s, 185s that I've ever flown, they always tend to burn a little gas, more gas out of the left tank initially. So, and it almost filled me up. So we took off, and they put a big chunk of Arliss 1 ice in my airplane, 350, 400 pounds. And Bobby had a passenger and some other stuff, and we'd taken a whole bunch of groceries and stuff out with us. Well, we flew about 20 minutes, and all of a sudden we got into some freezing rain. And I told Bobby, my front windshield iced over just right now. And I told Bobby, I said, we can't stay here. You know, we're going to fall out of the sky. And Bobby says, you're absolutely right. He says, let's go on top. So I got myself on his left, so he was on my left and just slightly ahead of me, and even with him, and we climbed through the overcast. And the visibility never got so that I couldn't see him. But we've climbed through the overcast on instruments, and when we got on top, we didn't have, ARL did not have shutters like we did at Wiens, where you could modulate the airflows through your oil cooler. Bobby had just taped over it with duct tape. So our oil temperature was pretty high, our oil pressure was not very good, and the airplanes looked like a couple of ice cubes. But I knew on top of that clear air, and that ice was going to sublimate, and sooner or later the airplane was going to be cleaned. And sure enough, we didn't make very good time going back to Barrow, and just about when it was just you barely couldn't see because of darkness, I could look down and we'd ran off the undercast, and there I could start seeing the ice below me, and flew on just a few more minutes, and out there in the darkness I could see that big tower at Barrow with the 4 big cables that would come down with the lights on them, and honestly, it looked like Chicago to me. I was very happy to see Barrow. I came in and landed. Max Brewer said, it's a good job that you guys did. I got paid 3 barrels of 8087 gas, which I used to hunt polar bears from my cup.